Hi and welcome to Boombox, the home of collaboration. I'm Fabio from Noise, and today we're going to be taking you through how to mix a tech house track from start to finish. The track we're going to be working on today is Vultures by LightHearts, which was submitted to me via my YouTube live stream. Every single Tuesday, I do something called Track Tuesday, where you get the opportunity to upload your music to Boombox, share it with me. I'll give you pro feedback live, and then at the end of every week, I choose one winner for a free mix and master, and every so often, we also give away $250 to the best track. None of this, of course, would be possible without Boombox, the home of music collaboration. If you're looking to share files, create beautiful looking playlists, and connect with a network of incredibly talented musicians and engineers, well, Boombox is the home for you. Link is in the description below, and you can sign up for free today. All right, let's take a listen to LightHearts master to get an idea of how the track should sound and feel, and LightHearts ideas for placement, levels, vibe, emotion, and so on. So immediately we can hear that it's really driven by the bass line, the drums, and the vocals. I feel like the vocals conflict a bit with the drums, and the bass and kick are just way too dominant. But it's fat, there's a lot of vibe, it's huge. Like the drums could be punchier, they could poke out a little bit more. I've got some ideas for that. The synth is cool. I think it needs some more effects though, make it stand up, make it a bit wonkier maybe. Okay, let's move further into the track, just see how it develops. I think I get the ideas, like how it should feel in the, it's a club song, obviously it's a dance record, how it should feel. And as you know, I like to start with broad strokes. So I always have these plugins loaded on every channel. You can see I've added some other ones because I listened to it before. I had some ideas that I wanted to experiment with. But I always have the Pro Q3, the Pro C2, and the SSL 4KE on every channel. Now, what I'm usually using this for is the Pro Q3 for cuts, like this. The Pro C2, of course, for compression. But as you noticed, it's off because I don't compress everything. It's just there if I need it, just because it's easier. And then the SSL 4K I use for the filters, the EQ, sometimes the compressor on here, sometimes the mic pre to get a bit of saturation, a bit of soft clipping, but I'll usually reach for something else, to be honest. It's mainly the EQ section that I like using with this plugin. Let's listen to the stems now, which should sound very similar to the master. Everything's a little bit loud. Let's just turn it down. I'm going to bring everything down minus 10 dB. That should give us enough headroom. Let's start with the kick and bass. Let's go for the kick. I know I said I do boost with the SSL, but right now I'm not too worried about doing that. I just want to get like the vibe right. The bass is very sustained, so I think it's important that we make this kick nice and tight. It's quite tight, but it could be tighter. Now you'll see me do this quite a lot because it's one of my favorite techniques for just getting that low end to sit right. So let's tighten the kick. This is the preset that I use. You see the difference? I think that's a little too much. Let's just pull. I'm not going to pull the mix down. I'm just going to move this LFO volume curve. That's going to make it nice and punchy. And then let's give it some more presence. Oh, it would help if I set the loop up correctly. So before. I know people say don't EQ soloed, but actually it's nice to EQ soloed and then do it in context. A little bit of both. You know, there's no rules here. It's just what feels right. And sometimes you need to be a bit focused on what's going on. And just remember when you are EQing something soloed, how you want the rest of the track to sound, right? So just thinking of everything else in context. Dealing with lames is not in my culture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out robo. And just immediately, that feels so much better. Before it's just so messy, so muddy, there's so much overlap. Now feels a little tighter. So with the bass, I want to start by, it's very dynamic. It's kind of all over the place. And we can see the waveforms here just poking through. We could make the bass feel a lot more sustained, controlled, and in the end, also make it louder, like the whole track a lot louder if we control this. So I've got 2 clippers. Now the reason I loaded 2 is because I wanted to show you guys 2 options. This is a very expensive clipper. I think it's like $200, maybe more. This one is $20, maybe less. So that's a big difference. Just want to give you guys the option. They're both great clippers. The reason why I pulled up the more expensive one is because it does have this gold dial, which basically increases the sustain, similar to what an Oxford inflator would do, if you're familiar with that. So let's go ahead and use the gold clip on this bass signal. I'm going to overdo it so you can really hear what's going on. We're just shaving off some of the top, clipping a couple of dB. I'm not noticing or hearing any distortion. It's such a good clipper. You really just don't with this. And then let's see if we can increase the sustain using this gold dial here. The bass already does have some sidechain on it, so I want to be careful about like clipping and compressing. I'm going to add my own sidechain too, though. So that actually sounds louder, and it monitors quieter, which is what we want. I'm going to switch that over now. Let's do a bit of EQing. Let's listen to it with the bass. Let's get the kick in here. I mean, you should EQ with your ears, not your eyes, but I'm just seeing where the fundamental sits. I might just dip that out ever so slightly. We also use sidechain to do this, but there's nothing wrong with using a bit of static EQ to carve out a bit of space. I also think the bass has a few too many high frequencies, which I don't love. I think that those high frequencies, again, I know I'm listening to the solo, but I'm thinking in context, those high frequencies from the bass might interfere with the drums, which is maybe why the drums aren't able to poke through as much like the hats. That feels like more of a volume issue or more of a processing issue. I don't know if the drums just are over-processed. But yeah, this is something I do very often, just filter out some of the high frequencies from those growlier sounding basses. And now the two parts feel like they're sitting a little more harmoniously. I like those low mids in the bass. I think they have a lot of warmth and they make the whole sort of the low end of the spectrum feel full and sustained. And because the track is driving from the bass and the kick, it's important that we keep those up front. So let's do a little bit of sidechain now. I'm going to use, but I like to experiment. I mean, the main sidechain tool that I use is Shaperbox. And the reason I use it, I have a setting in here called sidechain. Let's feed in the kick. I really like that I can very quickly choose which part of the frequency spectrum I'm sidechaining. So I can just say, okay, only below 200 hertz, and then that doesn't affect the high frequencies and the whole thing isn't pumping. And I mean, the kick is really coming through at around 70. So we could probably bring this down to about 100. And if the whole thing's pumping, see, I think that's just too much. So let's bring it down to around 100 where we had it. Let's pull the mix down ever so slightly. Let's rebalance it a little bit as well. I think the bass could just come down in volume. I wish the kick had a bit more in the high frequencies. I might try and add that. Again, maybe just bringing the bass down will help. And if I boost too many of the high frequencies, it adds too much presence and it makes it really bright. But there's a warmth, right? There's a relationship between the kick and the bass. They both sound like they have this warmth to them. So I don't want to go into this really bright, crispy mix, especially because I feel like the drums will fill that space later. But I do want to just kind of lift it out of the speaker and pull the wool over the top, like pull that cover over the top that we're kind of hearing, which makes things warm. And it's funny because, you know, when you put a cover over yourself, it also makes you feel warm. So that's that's the mental image that I have. Too much of a cover makes things sound muddy and woolly. Not enough of a cover makes things sound cold and brittle. So just a bit more presence there. Very subtle. Okay. Staying in the mindset of broad strokes, right? I discuss this and talk about this a lot when I'm mixing. Make sure that you're not focusing too much on one thing. Move quickly through the mix before your ears get tired. There's one thing that I forgot to do. This bass that I just realized I just need to cut out the side frequencies up to about 100. Make sure that low end is nice and mono. That should centralize it, make it more focused, prevent any phasing from happening, which would make us lose low end. We could also do some bus processing on this, but I'm going to come back to that later. That's not really a broad stroke for me. I really want to bring out this hat. I think this hat sounds wicked, and it's not... Yeah, it's not dominant enough. So with those high frequencies, that definitely brings the hat out a lot, but then it makes it, again, like that bright, brittle sound. We want the slightly warmer sound. As for the clap, let's use the cheaper clipper. Let's do some hard clipping. A little bit less. Try the soft clip as well. I actually prefer that because we have the saturator, so we can decrease the level but increase the amount of frequencies and therefore get a fuller sounding clap but at a lower metered volume. Too many low frequencies in there though, so let's take those out with this low shuff here. It's funny, sometimes you take out low frequencies and what happens is things sound brighter, and because those low frequencies tend to be masking the rest of the sound. So with this, all I'm doing is like a low shelf, right? Looks like this. And by taking out these frequencies here, we're able to focus on the higher frequencies in that sound or that signal. And you'll find that very often. Sometimes instead of boosting elsewhere, you do a cut further down and you get the sound that you're after in the first place. Listen to this hat soloed. I want to see if I can shape this sound a little bit more. Let's use just a Logic enveloper. Pull down the sustain, add a little bit of attack. And then add a little bit more sustain, but I'm going to use a reverb to do this. Let's give it a bit of space, because I don't feel like anything does have any of that. And you can be really subtle. Now I'm blending a medium reverb and a short reverb here. You don't really notice it. It's super subtle, but it's just adding something into the space, into the background of the track. Let's just solo the master now. I like to reference the original demo every so often just to see what direction we're heading into. Turn up. I mean, this is, oh yeah, it's because I have this on. Let's just match the volumes a bit. So we're definitely controlling that kick and bass a little bit more. We've lost a bit of the fat low end. I think we could add that back very easily later. Again, just doing broad strokes right now, just trying to get it to feel more balanced. This feels a little high in volume, the open hat, so I'm just going to pull that back. Let's put a little bit of that room reverb on the clap. Again, it's just so subtle. It doesn't have to be obvious. It's just about giving it a feeling rather than giving it a reverb. Don't want anyone to know that there's a reverb on there. There's a lot of low frequencies in this, which are interfering with the kick and the bass. When I say a lot, I was exaggerating a bit, but it just felt distracting to my ear. I wonder if actually is worth this having a sidechain on just on that frequency there that's coming through. Just I feel like it's just interfering. But if it has a sidechain, then it's not. This is a cool moment in the bass, and I feel like it could be exaggerated. And I know we're doing broad strokes, but it just came to my head right now. It's like, let's make this feel like a little bit more like a breakdown bass. I'm going to use this plugin. I think it's amazing. I don't care what anyone says. Oh, it's cheating, or nah, it's just amazing. It's an amazing plugin that has so many effects in one. Like, why would you not use it? You know? And I'm just going to add a little bit of this in this section. It's a filter, a reverb, like a flanger, and a delay in one, I think. And you have these different settings. And that one's really subtle, that works. I like that one. There's a bit more of delay, there's less of that kind of riser sound. Let's just make it subtle and just a little bit more dramatic, so when it comes back in, it has a bit more impact. Again, like barely noticeable. We could also put it on the snare riser. I'm not gonna lie. I think the snare riser maybe needs a bit of help. Yeah, because it just doesn't get like that much more interesting at this point. It doesn't have as much tension. So let's do that. Let's grab the and a smile, and then I'll show you guys how to copy automation and Logic. Just so you just highlight it with the marquee tool, Command C, and then boom, Command V, like that. So let's start a bit earlier. See, that just gives it a little bit more welly. Now, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, a bit more tension. Welly is such like an English way. And you know what? I think the volume could come up too. Just why not? Let's give it a bit of volume automation. Never do volume automation with volume, guys. Always do it with the gain plugin. Why? Because otherwise you lose autonomy over your volume fader. You don't want to do that because it's really annoying when you're trying to mix later and then you have to adjust the automation rather than just stick a gain plugin on. So easy. Oh, by the way I'm doing that curve like that, just Control Shift, click and drag. Yeah, you know what? Maybe 6 is fine. Like, just let's put it a bit more in your face. The snare rise is currently part of the drums group, which I actually don't think is right. It should be part of the effects group. So I'm going to move that. But that's okay. Okay, cool. We're gonna tackle the vocal next. Super important.
Dealing with lames is not in my culture.
Okay, so the first things first. Let's just deal with compressing it because it's just a bit all over the place. I'm going to use an RVox setting for this. I'm going to start with that, see if it works. This is great. You can copy this, guys. It's emulating the RVox from the Waves RVox, of course. And then all you have to do is pull the threshold down. You'll see I have a bunch of settings for the Pro C2 that I use all the time that I've set up over the past year.
Dealing with lames is not in my culture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out robo.
Now I want to be really conscious of over compressing this vocal because if I compress it too much, it's going to like bring out a lot of the delay in the background. That will sound quite sort of unnatural and unbalanced. So I'm just trying to tame some of the peaks here.
Dealing with lames is not in my culture.
There's a sidechain on it as well, I think, which is making it pump a little bit. So I also want to be conscious of that. I don't know if this is the right setting. I'm going to try another Pro C2 just with a more kind of bland setting. Just what I have loaded now as my default.
Dealing with lames is not in my.
But just increase the attack speed so it's the fastest.
Dealing with lames is not in my culture.
Almost treating it like a limiter.
Dealing with lames is not in my culture.
Maybe just 2 styles of compression are going to work here. So one Pro C2 with my sort of very clean settings. And then let's do another Pro C2.
Dealing with lames is not in my culture.
With the RVox. So it's not having to work as hard to compress, right? You've got one dealing with the peaks a little bit more, and then the Pro C2 is dealing with the overall average signal.
Dealing with lames is not in my culture.
And then you just have something that sounds a lot more balanced. Now let's EQ it in context.
Dealing with lames is not in my culture.
Just the compression makes it feel so much more sort of upfront already.
Dealing with lames is not in my culture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out robo.
I'm just gonna turn the analyzer off because this thing's really distracting.
Dealing with lames is not in my culture.
I feel like there's some.
Dealing with lames is not in my culture.
It's a little heavy-handed here, so let's just take a little bit of that out.
Dealing with lames is not in my culture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out robo. Too many snakes messing with a vulture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out robo. Dealing with lames is not in my culture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out robo. Too many snakes messing with a vulture.
Ooh, I kind of like the high frequencies coming up a lot. I wonder if we could do it with a different plugin. So I'm going to try a couple here. Again, mixing is also experimenting. I know often on tutorials, it feels like people just have it down. They're like, I'm going to go for this plugin and this is going to sound good. It's like, yeah, sometimes it just doesn't. And it's okay to be like, let me try a couple of plugins and get a feeling for which one sounds better. So we've got the mag EQ here. Now this got this famous airband, which is really nice. It's quite clean. And then this one here is a tube EQ. So it's clean, but it's smoother. It's kind of more musical sound. So sometimes for boosting high frequencies, it can sound more pleasant, but the sound is a little more smeared and indirect. So let's try both. Let's start with the mag.
Dealing with lames is not in my culture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out robo. Too many snakes messing with a vulture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out robo.
So by adding the high frequencies, it just makes the vocal more discernible. We do want to be conscious again of the fact that we're trying to create a warm mix. We're not trying to make it too bright. I'm exaggerating these settings a little bit right now, just so I can hear what's going on. Okay, let's try it here. Same, we'll do 10. Nice broad bandwidth with the pull tech.
Dealing with lames is not in my culture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out rover. Too many snakes messing with a vulture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out rover.
Okay, let's try the two. Let's try the mag, and let's try the pull tech.
Dealing with lames is not in my culture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out rover. Too many snakes messing with a vulture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out rover. Dealing with lames is not in my culture.
The mag feels like punchier and clearer, and then the pull tech feels like, again, like smeared and warmer, but I'm leaning a little bit more towards the mag. Let's try it one more time.
Dealing with lames is not in my culture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out rover. Too many snakes messing with a vulture.
Yeah, as soon as I turn this on, even though I'm not boosting by that much, that sounds a bit harsh. So the mag it is. I can actually bring this down a little bit.
Dealing with lames is not in my culture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out rover. Too many snakes messing with a vulture.
Let's give me a little bit of presence, and then let's go soothe. There's just some harsh frequencies there, which soothe is going to deal with just quickly and efficiently.
Dealing with lames is not in my culture.
There you go.
Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out rover. Too many snakes messing with a vulture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out rover.
And I wonder if maybe we want to boost some of the lower frequencies to give it some of that warmth.
Dealing with lames is not in my culture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out rover. Too many snakes messing with a vulture.
Yeah, because I'm thinking that when you're in the rave, that's where you'd be listening to this, you're going to want to understand and hear what the vocal is saying. Like in the master,
Dealing with lames is not in my culture.
it feels a bit buried.
Dealing with lames is not in my culture.
Little low mids fighting.
Dealing with lames is not in my culture.
This feels more balanced. This is actually too loud now, but it's definitely the right idea.
Dealing with lames is not in my culture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out rover. Too many snakes messing with a vulture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out rover.
Okay, so we have these other vocals as well. We might just be able to copy and paste the chain.
Mama's supposed to be loose to the.
Yeah, I think so. Let's just copy and paste it. Maybe we want to create a slightly tonal difference.
Blacked out rover.
I think it's a shame that the low end and the bass comes in here before it drops. Or sorry, the kick. Because it kind of gives it away. Like, it drops there at 17. It kind of gives away the impact. So I'm going to pull back a little bit on that. I'm going to use a little bit of the endless smile on this section. And then on the kick, let's just grab a filter. So it can increase in volume, but just not low end. And my favorite filter for low and high cuts, or low pass, high pass, whatever you want to call it, is the Fab Filter Simplon. Just think it's the smoothest, cleanest. No one even knows about this plugin or ever uses it. I don't know why, but just check that sounds okay. And solo. And with the bass. Yeah, Yeah, I just think that's much better. And the impact is not a huge difference, but it is enough of a difference that I'm like, oh, okay, I'm engaged with the track now. Right. Let's talk about the leads, of which, it seems that there is only one. Just want to check that that's correct. Okay, it seems like there's just, it says 1, 2, 3, but it seems that there's just one, which is fine. But this lead, okay, so I listened to this earlier and I thought, this needs to be way more obnoxious, you know? This is the only time that there's a new sound in the track. I'm actually going to start by clipping it a little bit, see how that sounds. Let's use the standard clip. You can hear too much distortion there. I'm just trying to shave some of the top off. Yeah, I see. You can really hear it there. And sometimes if a clipper doesn't work, you can always just use a limiter. Yeah, I really noticed it on the higher notes. I'm going to try a different clipper, see if it's any better. Sometimes different clippers have different results. This is another clipper that I really like, that I use. Again, you could use one clipper for everything. Like, I think like the more expensive clippers tend to sound more expensive, as in like they have less distortion. This one is great. I love this. Can shave off like 5 whatever it is. How many decibels am I shaving off? 1 or 2. I can just increase the input here as well. So I'm getting that nice clipping, bit of drive, bit of saturation, but with really like minimal distortion, all this detail preservation as well. I don't really feel like I'm affecting the signal too much. Yeah, and in a track like this, where headroom is really important, headroom being how much room I have left on the master channel when all the sounds are playing together and I need to master in order to maximize the loudness of the track, which is something that someone is looking for from an engineer when making this genre, right? So I'm obviously going to do what's best for the track, but I'm also conscious of, like, with this genre, people want to be loud, fat, pumping, high LUFS, all those things. So I'm thinking contextually as broadly as possible, like what my role is, what the track's role is, what the producer wants, and folding all those things in together. And with this track, he clearly wants big thumping kick and bass, present vocals. He wants it to be loud because it's a club track, it's a tech house track. And so I need to find ways to get there. And this is one of them. And we're going to compromise, right? We don't have as much punch from the sound. However, what we do have is a sound that I'm going to be able to bring the volume up of at least 5 dB because I've shaved 5 dB off with this really nice clipper. Listen to me saying really nice clipper like it's a person. Okay. I created this effects chain earlier. It's reverb, pitch drift, so pitch modulation, OTT, Pro C2 for side chains, so it's ducking out of the way when the original dry sound is playing and then coming back in when it's silent, and a bit of side chain as well. And this is what it sounds like. I wanted to make something a little wonky. I think it sounds really good in context. Love that. I wonder if the sound could have more high frequencies. I'm going to give the sound more high frequencies using a plugin that I love called Spectre. Just for anyone using this who has this or has used it, I always keep de-emphasis enabled. So when it's disabled, you're using it as an EQ and a saturator. When it's enabled, I'm only increasing the saturation for this part of the frequency spectrum. And also, if you put in an aggressive, you can like really hear what's going on, and then you can always dial it back. So hear it without anything. I will admit that this effect is a little hardcore. Let's bring it back. I mean, it's just a little too obvious right now. I think this effect can be subtle and in the background. I also added this this delay effect. So I've got this Echo Boy with the 16th delay, big low cut on there. So it's really just focused on the high frequencies. And then this is a 636 spring reverb unit, which has a germanium, I just want to get this right. It has a germanium transistor in it, which is a very specific type of distortion, which sounds really, really cool. So sometimes I just use this as a distortion unit. Sometimes I use it as a reverb unit. Sometimes I use it as both. And it's got this naughty sound to it, but I don't want to have too much of this. I want to make this really, really, really subtle. And then a bit of room reverb. This is an important sound. This is why I'm spending time on it. Keeping it warm, you know, just glued to everything else. Okay, so we do have this background vocal here. This is really important. I wonder if we could just have a bit more like flow to it. Like it's blip, 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 blip. It's like very like in your face the whole time. And I wonder if it could have some volume shaping. So let's try this with the shaper box. Just grab a volume. I just want like an increase like that. That looks cool. Just Just bring that down. Let's make it nice and smooth. And then, yeah, I think one bar. Just less obvious. Let's try 2 bars. I like that if it was less obvious. No, it needs to be over 1 bar. It's too slow. Sorry. I also think it's such a cool sound and it could be more stereo. So I'm going to feed it to these 2 buses that I have. One with an H3000 with, what's the effect on that? The dual H910S, just to think it sounds great. And I've got a micro shift here as well. Let me just max these out so you can hear what it sounds like. It gives it just such a great space and width. I feel like there's some like kind of low frequencies that are... Yeah, I thought I could hear something down there. Let's just take that out. And let's use the Fab Filter Saturn to add some distortion. I like the grittiness. I think it's going to help it poke through a bit. Let's take a quick break to remember that these videos are possible because of Boombox. You can sign up for free today, link is in the description below. If you're a music producer looking to make your life easier, more organized, and look more professional, well, then you've come to the right place. Not only can you share files, but you can do them with artist branding so people know that they're coming from you and can listen to your music through a pro looking and sounding player, as well as having access to all your social media links in one place. And Boombox will store all your files safely and securely, which is why I use it with all my clients for mixing, mastering, production, and much more. Link is in the description below. Sign up for free today. All right, let's keep listening through, just check that the rest of the track is flowing in the way it should. There weren't a lot of parts here, so it's a pretty simple mix. And now I can get a little bit more into the details, such as the bus processing, further parallel processing, balancing, and then, or rebalancing, I should say, and then eventually the master. Now, overall, the production is really good. So that's why it doesn't need a lot of attention in the mix. I think a lot of people think, you have to spend hours mixing, but that's not necessarily the case if it already sounds good. Love that snare fill. Let's clip it so that we can make it louder. There's just some kind of like annoying frequency coming through on the reverb. just taking some of the focus away from the snare. I still feel like this is a little underwhelming. I feel like it needs more high frequencies. We're gonna see what happens if I put OTT on. Because OTT does this like synthetic thing, which sounds great. It does this like over-processed upward compression, which can add like a modern feel to certain sounds. By the way, these are my default settings. You should copy them. Depth at 20%, output gain at minus 0.2 decibels because it always adds volume, and I hate that when plugins add volume because then I can't get a fair A/B comparison. It's like, yeah, when that sound comes in, it like doesn't catch my ear. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make sure that when it comes in this section, I'm like, oh, new sound, exciting. So this section here, again, it doesn't drop very well. Like it's not exciting. And that big snare comes in. And then after the snare, you're kind of hoping for, I mean, there is a crash. We could bring that up a little bit, but it just doesn't have the impact that I feel that it should. That's better. Let's put a bit of sidechain on the crash. Let's just copy and paste the shaper box, but we want to make sure that it's sidechaining all of the frequencies. Yeah, that feels just better. Just feels like the transition is better. And by better, I mean stronger. The energy cuts out more and then comes in. And I know DJs will do that themselves, but I think you should be doing that in the production too. Let's get rid of these leads because they clearly don't exist. And keep listening through. Yes, the snare automation that we had before. Let's make sure we copy that. Give that snare a bit more oomph. Maybe we could sort of actually extend it a little bit. So, we need to copy this as well. Extend the gain automation. Extend the endless smile automation and just curve it a little bit with I'm just doing Control and Shift here for that curve tool.
Too many snakes messing with a vulture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out rover.
And I'm sure you heard that too, but
Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out rover.
we lose a bit of the discernibility of the vocal in this section. I wonder if it's worth having just a slightly different version for the break
Dealing with lames is not in my culture.
with a little bit more high frequency presence. And I'm going to use Saturn for this. I'm putting it on a different channel as well, so I know what's going on. As in, when I look at the arrangement, I can remember, oh, okay, I did something different with this part of the vocal. And what I'm going to do is just automate the level on the clean tape to give it more frequencies, more harmonics, sorry, in this section here. Which will give it more presence. And stop it from feeling so drowned out. Let's just listen.
Too many snakes messing with a vulture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out rover.
And then it's matching the energy of the snare, you see? Let me show you from a little bit before.
Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out rover. Too many snakes messing with a vulture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out rover.
I think I could go even harder.
Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out rover. Too many snakes messing with a vulture.
You don't really need it here, but you do need it here, and I don't want to do like an EQ lift because then it's going to increase the volume a lot. Not that increasing the harmonics doesn't increase the volume, but it just does it in a different way that I think in this scenario sounds better.
Too many snakes messing with a vulture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out rover. Mama still supposed to be loose to the.
Okay, let's bring the clap down. Let's bring that hat up.
Blacked out rover.
It's funny, I bring the clap down a bit, I bring the hat up a bit, and it's like feels imbalanced. So that says to me, well, why don't I just create a little bit of bus processing to glue them together a bit more? I think the answer might be using just a bit of tape saturation.
Loose to the.
Sorry, I'm just looking for the tape saturation that I like to use, which is, it's here, I don't know why. The Oxide tape recorder. Reason being, very easy to use. You can drive the input and the output, and then I can choose between a brighter or darker sound, 15 IPS being brighter, 7.5 being darker. Having the 15 IPS is what's going to suit this the most. Actually, I think I'm wrong. I think the brighter one helps them poke through a little bit more, and in a nice, in a pleasant sounding way. So I'm using tape saturation actually as an EQ. I'm not using it for its intended purpose, which most people use it for saturation, but I like to use it actually more as like a compressor and an EQ because it absorbs and tames some of the transients, and whilst doing that, it also changes the way they sound tonally, which is the EQ part. We're getting this sort of harshness coming through in this crash here. So let me just deal with that. Which is affecting those initial hats. Those initial hats sound really harsh. So what we need to do here then is just make sure. I just don't like that interference. Let's try this. I'm gonna put this on. This is a Pro Q3. You'll see where I'm going with this in a second. Open hat. Most of the open hat, the crossover I feel is happening around 4K. So we'll make this dynamic downward. And then let me make this a little larger. You'll see what I'm talking about in a second. Now I need to feed in the side chain, which will be the open hat. And then here, if you click on auto, there's a little sidechain button. I don't know why this is so hidden. But now I can just sidechain the open hat to the crash in this frequency area. So when the hat plays, the crash is going to dip in this section. And now we don't get that buildup of harshness that I was hearing before. Check it out. And you get this not so great shift in energy. Now the change in energy isn't as obvious as like when the crash is in there, all of a sudden there's all these like high frequencies coming through and then they die down and then it's underwhelming. Whereas now it feels more controlled because the hat is taking out those high frequencies, the space for them in the crash, when the crash plays. So the open hat still feels as impactful, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hits later on. Is there a bit of white noise here? No? Let's check this out a second. Just roll off some of that high end. So a bit more at 2.5 here, a little bit more out the lows, just felt I was interfering with the kick and bass. Oof, sounded good. I mean, I'm enjoying it. Okay, let's do some more nitty gritty processing. Kick and bass. We really need these to be controlled to get the loudest master possible. So how do we do this? Bust them together, mute the kick, load up a limiter. I've got this setting here called kick and bass bus. And then what I'm going to do is just increase the limiter until I start to see a bit of gain reduction coming from the kick. And then I'm going to pull back. That's where I want it. I don't want any gain reduction from. That's where I want it. I don't want any gain reduction from this plugin. And then when I solo the bass, because there are moments in the bass where, as you can see, when the two frequencies meet from the kick and the bass, these transients pop through. Now, I might be able to deal with this earlier on by putting a limiter on the bass too. But it feels like all those peaks are hitting the same. So what that's telling me is that when the kick and the bass are playing together in those moments, that's what's generating those peaks. really can't hear the difference. Let's listen to the delta. So what we're taking out. Just a little bit here and there. And that's just when the kick and the bass are playing together. They just need to be tamed and dealt with. And then I can also EQ them as one if I want to. And let's use a fancy EQ. I think let's go for the Neve. This is nice. I mean, this sounds good on everything, but awesome on a kick and bass bus. Oh my gosh, that's loud. 1 second. Thank you. Pretty subtle. Sounds good to me. Now let's introduce the drums. Gonna do a bit of clipping here. And with the gold clip again, I can also increase the sustain if I want. So I can get a thicker, fuller sound just in a couple of moves. I don't really think it needs any more than that. You know, I could compress, I could add the black box, Oxford inflator. I've got all these things here, but I'm actually happy with where it is right now. Maybe I'll do a bit of parallel processing, but I think that sounds pretty good. There's some high frequencies here that are annoying me. It just sounds like it needs some de-essing. Let's just use a de-esser. Also, could this sound cooler? It's a bit clean, isn't it? Could it have like a telephone sound? I don't know if the client is going to like a telephone sound, but it doesn't mean that there's any harm in trying it. I just saw this plugin. Let's see if this does the job of like a telephone and a bit of like sort of pitch drifting.
Messing with a vulture. 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 Messing with a vulture.
That might actually, it takes out some of the fizziness too.
Messing with a vulture.
I think that sounds better. We'll have to see if the client likes it or not. But
Messing with a vulture.
the client being LightHearts, who's the winner of Track Tuesday. So he's not really a client, but I would consider him one still because I'm doing this mix for him.
Messing with a vulture. Messing with a vulture. Messing with a vulture. Messing with a vulture. Messing with a vulture.
He does have it clean there, so I should make it clean. I should just leave it. All right. Now, for those of you who've seen me master before, I have a effects chain that I like to use. And actually, yeah, I know a lot of you will think like that this is sacrilegious or whatever, but I do use AI mastering. Not because I'm using the AI mastering, but because I like to have a second opinion. And because I don't have anyone here, this is so useful. This is the one I used, the isotope. I just put a cycle around the loudest part of my track, let it do its thing. It does jump up in volume, so I just want everyone to let's just turn the gain match on so that doesn't happen. Or let's just bring the volume down for now. Yeah, and I just use it to analyze, just to tell me like, oh, am I doing the right thing? And do I agree with its changes? It might be wrong, but at least if I think it's wrong, then I'm like, okay, well, I was right. Do you see what I mean? Anyway, enough talking. Let me just analyze this track. I told you it's going to get really loud. So let's turn the maximizer off. See, I don't agree with this at all. Let's give it another go. I think I might got it wrong. I did the same thing again. See, I just don't agree with that. Like, unfortunately, I'm going to compromise some of my mastering by having a much bigger low end, a much louder low end. But that's what I want the focus of the track to be. So how much is this suggesting that I'm ducking by? Well, it says 2 dB there, but I can see here it's all the way down to 4, which is a lot. Big boost in the mids, maybe that's not so wrong, but this I'm not sure about. Okay, the imager, yeah, that seems fine to me. I trust imaging. Just less impact on the mids. And then let's check this dynamic EQ. So it's worth going through and soloing these and just trying to understand what it's ducking, because sometimes it can duck. It's a dynamic EQ, right? So it can duck like transients essentially that, decrease like compressed transients, which you don't want because it's going to take away from the punch of your track. So sometimes you just want less, sometimes you don't want it at all. That's fine. Yeah, that's fine as well. A bit of like sort of de-essing there, don't mind that. Let's just bring that volume back up. I mean, I'm not going to disagree that I think the low end needs a little bit of controlling at the master stage, but the amount it did was just wrong. You see, so that's the second opinion. And you're like, no, I don't agree. I like where it is. You're messing with me. And sometimes it enhances and you're like, nice changes. So yeah, bit of gold clip, just clipping some of the frequencies, adding some of that sustain with the gold dial, which sounds great. You know what, that clap is it's coming through a little hard. I wonder if we could just soften it ever so slightly with a different saturation. The Logic stock plugin is actually great for this. Reason being because it keeps the character of the sound. And the harmonics it adds are really nice. But without adding too much, it doesn't soften. You know, when you push things into an overdrive or a clipper, it can like soften the attack, which I don't mind too much because you don't want too much attack coming from a clap when you're in the club because it's, I don't know, it can be disorientating and just disorientating is the wrong word. It can just be annoying. So now I think we've gone too far in the wrong direction. So let's just pull back a bit here. Shaving off a couple of dB there. Sounds great to me. Oh, let's actually keep the loop there. The cycle, because that's where we're mastering. Yeah, these are my settings for mastering. Attack at 30, release and auto, ratio at 4, and then we have the sidechain at 90 hertz. I usually just leave it there. That just feels like the sweet spot for me, especially with dance music. And with this compressor, I'm trying to get a bit of the sound of the compressor. Now, the compressor has a slightly brighter sound, which I feel brings out the mids and high mids in this nice kind of pop-like way. And the compressor tends to react more to the mid-range anyway. So even with the low frequencies cut out, sometimes you don't need that at all because the compressor, the SSL compressor, I've always found reacts just way more to the mid-range than it does to the low frequencies. I think it's something to do with like the transformer. I remember there's like a setting in some other versions of the SSL compressor which allow you to turn this off, but I think I like it on. I think that's what makes this compressor very useful for mastering, is that it's not just pumping away at the low frequencies. It's just providing like a tiny bit of glue, a tiny bit. Okay, bit of soothe. Just making everything sweet sounding. And I use Gullfoss on the low frequencies, but because we have a version in Ozone, I don't think that we actually need it. So let's just get rid of that. Let's go straight to the limiter. We might need to do some additional clipping beforehand, but I'm not sure until I get here. I think the answer is yes. We're at 12 here, so let's push this to 11. So this feels like the clipping is it's coming from the drums actually. Right, so we need a bit more volume out of this here. I'm gonna engage the Oxford inflator. This is the way I use it. Pull the output all the way down and then increase the input until you're getting a little bit of clipping and you can just pull it back. So we'll do 9 here, plus 9, and then we do minus 9 to balance it. The reason I'm doing this is because when you drive the input, this is what the manual says. I don't know how many people read the manual when it comes to plugins, but this is what the manual says. Drive the input to the point of almost clipping, or clipping. Then you do whatever you want with the output, and then increase the effect of the Oxford inflator. But if you set this up correctly, the input changes how the effect sounds. So the more input it has, the less of this that you actually need for it to give it that inflating sound. So in essence, then the plugin is working correctly. That just gave us like a dB on the LUFS. We actually just roll it back a little bit. Sounds good though. And then I can pull back on the limiter. Let me actually pull back on this here. It's a balancing act between all of these things. And then let's finish off with master plan. Now, this is going to get loud, guys, so please, actually, I'll just turn it down here. I'll turn it down here so we don't have to worry about the volume increase. And this is the old version of master plan. I do have the new one here. This is the update, which has new meters. I don't like the look as much, to be honest, but not that that really matters. Oh, it looks like there's an update too. Maybe I could change the color faceplate white. Yes. Nice. So we're at 12 here. Usually master plan, I just match whatever the Pro L2 is saying. I don't need to go louder than that. I mean, that sounds loud as hell. It's super punchy as well. Do you know what I mean? Like the bass sounds big, the kick is cutting through, the drums sound nice. Like I could limit and we could try and get more LUFS out of it, but then I might compromise some of that dynamic feeling, which is nice, you know, and it gives the track life. Don't want to overdo it with these things. But let's listen through.
Mama's goose must be loose to the blacked out rover. Mama's goose must be loose to the blacked out rover. masseuse must be loose to the. My masseuse must be loose to the. My masseuse must be loose to the. My masseuse must be loose to the. Dealing with lames is not in my culture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out rover. Too many snakes messing with a vulture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out rover. Dealing with lames is not in my culture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out rover. Too many snakes messing with a vulture. Dodging bad vibes in my blacked out rover. My masseuse must be loose to the. Loose to the. Blacked out rover. My masseuse must be loose to the. Loose to the. Blacked out rover. Messing with a vulture. 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 My masseuse must be loose to the. My masseuse must be loose to the. My masseuse must be loose to the.
I'm really happy with how this turned out. It sounds punchy, fat, controlled. The drums are a little bit harsh in places, so I just wanted to tame those. As you're mixing, your ears can get tired sometimes. I'm doing everything in headphones. Usually I also do checks on my studio monitors and my laptop speakers, which I will do when I get off this video just to double check everything. Like those are my two other reference monitors. But yet, thank you to Lightheart for sending in this great track, Vultures. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.